Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to stick to Sweden, and we're also going to stick to my home county of Skåne here in the very south of the country. We're returning to a brewery that has featured on the channel many times before, and I've had a few different styles from this brewery, but it is most definitely fair to say that this brewery is best known for their different kinds of Imperial Stout, and this is one of their latest releases through Systembolaget here in Sweden. It is supposed to be very nice. It is a style I know these guys can do very, very well. So needless to say, I'm very curious to see what this one is going to have in store for us. So for this review then, we are going to head to Arlöv, which is a little bit to the southwest of me here in Lund, on the way to Malmö. Always pass through there on my way to work. But we're going to have a look at another beer from the wonderful Nerd Brewing. So this one is called Assert. It comes in at 11.5% ABV. It is, of course, an Imperial Stout, but they're describing this one as an Imperial Affogato Stout with coffee and vanilla. So this was released as part of the Lokalt på Småskalig assortment through Systembolaget here in Sweden for October of 2022. And it is, I believe, my first one from Nerd where there's been Affogato in the description. So we need to see how we get on with that. But Nerd Brewing are kind of experts at playing around with Imperial Stouts and just seeing how things can work. But yeah, let's crack on and see what this one is going to have in store for us. So, as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done it from Nerd Brewing in the past, and we will no doubt add more to that list in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support you give is massively, massively appreciated. And as always, you can go into the channel homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you happen to be interested in. Do check out the playlist of beers from different countries as well. You'll find this one in the Swedish playlist. The whole channel, of course, is wired for you guys to find beers from your local areas and stuff like this. But yeah, let's crack on then and talk a wee bit about Nerd Brewing then before we try Assert. So, Nerd Brewing, as I've told you, were originally based in Malmö, here in Skåne in the south of Sweden, but the company was founded by Hannes Gruber and Karin Karlsson back in 2015 when they had their premiere at the Malmö Öl and Whiskey Festival, and both of these guys were big beer enthusiasts who just wanted to get into the industry. So Hannes, on the one hand, had been a home brewer for a long time, but he got very good feedback on his beers, and it was this that inspired him to turn professional. He comes from a background in software development, and he was taking care of the brewing side of things originally, and that is why many of the beers have, things that are related to programming as their names, Assert and so on. But of course, Karen, on the other hand, she was an entrepreneur and trader within the IT industry, and she managed the business side of the brewery originally, but she is no longer part of the company. So they started up with a very modest production, but they became the most highly rated brewery in Sweden on Untappd, and they are still the most highly rated beer brewery, actually. It's only a few of the meaderies, I think, that are above them. They might actually be in second place actually on the Untappd ratings, but yeah, these guys are the most highly rated brewery according to Untappd here in Sweden. But the beers were originally produced at the Lilla Ölfabriken Chad beer facility in Rosengård in Malmö, and one or two were produced at South Plains next door. But the company officially joined with Chad Beer and Lilla Ölfabriken to form a collective, and they continue to sell their beers under their own brands. But Nerd Brewing, of course, brew mainly Imperial Stouts, although in the past they have released some IPAs. They released a barley wine as well. We reviewed one of the barley wines for you here on the channel. It was really good. I forget the name of it, but it was awesome. The IPA was called Switch, and I was really impressed by that as well. But yeah, you never know. We might see a few different styles from Nerd Brewing going forward. We'll just need to wait and see. But in the early days, other than some beer festivals around Sweden, it was actually very, very difficult to get a hold of the Nerd Brewing beers. However, from 2018, they started selling their beers in Systembolaget, and in March of 2021, they started a new collective called Molecule, which includes Elm 11, Nerd and Chad Beer. They've got their new facility in Arlöv. It starts off with a 1500 litre brew kit. These days they are opening up the place once a month to host a kind of brewery tap, if we can call it that, and yeah, things are going very, very well for them. But the Molecule Collective, as it stands, it's mainly Anders from Elm 11, who is doing the brewing. Hannes, of course, is doing the the recipe for the recipes for the Nerd Brewing brand. But yeah, it's Anders from Elm 11 that's doing the brewing. The Chad beer brand is producing mainly like IPAs and lagers and stuff like this. Elm 11 is doing the kind of sour side of things, whereas Nerd Brewing are the Imperial Stouts, and I'm guessing any big malty things that they want to do will be released through Nerd Brewing as well later on. But as of October 2022, when I'm filming this review for you, there have been 110 different beers released as part of the Nerd Brewing brand. And yeah, as I say, Imperial Stouts. If you want to try some good Swedish Imperial Stouts, you cannot go wrong with Nerd Brewing. But yeah, that's all I can really tell you about these guys for the moment. If you want to learn more about them, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on. And you can, of course, check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages, and that'll tell you a little bit more about all the different beers that they've done. Or you can, of course, check out some of my older reviews as well. But yeah, let's crack on and have a wee look at this beer itself. So yeah, as you can see, the label on this one is pretty much as we've seen from Nerd Brewing before. We should also point out this slogan here, open source beer. So Hannes tries to put up the recipes for his beers on the Nerd Brewing website. If there isn't one there, he does say just contact him and he will make sure that that gets up. But yeah, he wants people to be able to go in and use his recipes for home brewing and so on, hence the name, hence the slogan, open source beer. But yeah, as we said earlier, this one is called Assert Imperial Affogato Stout with coffee and vanilla, 11.5%. We have had ones around this strength before and ones that have been a bit stronger. And this time we have a brown wax cap, which is quite nice. So yeah, let's crack this guy open and we'll see what we have. Here we are. I do like that the wax on these is never like too thick. You can always get it open just with a simple opener. So yeah, 11.5% Imperial Affogato Stout. Should be good. And you can see from the pour it is the thickness that we expect from Nerd Brewing, coffee and vanilla. So let's just line this up and now we can relax and enjoy the beer. So as you can see, this beer is poured with about yeah, I would say 2/3, 3/4 finger of a frothy, quite dark tan head actually. I'll just let you have a little look at that. You can see a lot of nice kind of small bubbles in there, but some slightly bigger ones too. 1 or 2 big bubbles sticking toward the side of the glass and a few little ones just heading up toward the bottom of the head there. But yeah, the colour of this beer is a lovely kind of dark ebony rosewood. It looks very, very nice actually. Yeah, the way that goes together is pretty much as expected of an Imperial Stout. Remember, the colour of your beer depends on 1, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. 2, the length of your wort boil is also going to play a role. The longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise and thus you get a darker colour of beer. Any barrel aging that you do or any adjuncts that you put in will affect the colour of the beer too. But yeah, when it comes to Imperial Stouts, you don't have to care about the latter 2 variables that much. It is mainly the black malt that's going to give you the colour. If I remember rightly, Hannes likes to use Special B as the base in a lot of these stouts. But yeah, this one is pretty much black as night. You're not going to get darker than that. And I know that Nerd Brewing like to use very long wort boils. So yeah, I don't think we really need to say anything else about the appearance of this beer. We have seen this kind of thing before from Nerd Brewing, and it is what you would expect from the Imperial Stout style. So yeah, I think we just need to take a little look at the aroma and see how we get on. Oh, that is very nice. That is very, very nice. So yeah, Affogato Stout, coffee and vanilla. It is cool. It is very nice. It's actually, for me, it's interesting because it almost has a little bit of a slightly crisp, biscuity base to it in a way, but you've got a lot more complexity starts to come out of it as well. Yeah, that's a really interesting aroma. One of the more kind of quirky ones, I think, that I've had from Nerd over the last wee while. Affogato, of course, is it's like an Italian coffee liqueur, if I remember correctly. So this beer does have a little bit more of that kind of liqueur-y type note to it. It's almost got a little bit of a kind of Bailey's, Bailey's coffee type thing to it. That is actually quite coffee thing. This beer actually reminds me of Cafe Carlson. You know, in the pub in Bishop's Arms, Gustav Adolf's Torrey, there's lots of people come in and ask for Cafe Carlson. So yeah, bit of control, bit of you know, Bailey's in there, and yeah, this beer really does remind me of that actually. So yeah, it's actually one of the more kind of sweet and smooth and creamy leaning stouts I can think of that I've had from their brewing over the years. And I'm quite curious to see whether this one is going to have that usual, you know, roasty toasty backbone that you often find, or you pretty much always find from the Naird Brewing stouts. And that's one of the reasons why I enjoy these, because you know, it's a lot of the focus on stouts these days are on the big kind of sweet pastry things. For me, I like a good old school RIS or an Imperial milk stout. I'm not a great fan of the pastries, I have to admit. But yeah, the aroma of this is lovely. So for me, for sure with this one, you can get a little bit of that roasty toasty black malty backbone to the beer. But on top of that, there's a good little bit of a kind of brown bready character, and it does have a fair little bit of sweetness. And for me, inside the kind of the brown bready notes that you get in this beer, it does have that sort of you know, it does have that almost like Bailey's Control, you know, the Cafe Carlson type thing, which I'm assuming will be the Affogato. The coffee beans are there, but they're coming out toward the back of the nose. But yeah, roasty, toasty, well-fired bread crust, one or two little woody notes in there. There is a good little bit of nuttiness in this beer for me as well, and that comes out toward the front of the nose. But yeah, brown, you know, wholemeal bread, bit of rye bread, some nice kind of chocolatey notes in there. You have the chocolate's quite interesting because you do get some of that higher percentage cocoa chocolate, maybe a 70-80% darker chocolate, but you're also getting some kind of milky chocolate notes, you know, a 30-40% cocoa. The beer does contain vanilla, we have to remember that, and vanilla always does push out a more milky chocolate type aroma in my experience. So you have that, but on top of all of that, you know, the sort of affogato kind of thing, the breadiness that you have out of this beer almost smells a little bit cakey in a way. And of course it's like a sort of Bailey's or Cafe Carlson soaked muffin or something like that. That's what the kind of malt base that you get in this beer is like. And then there's definitely some brown sugar to this one. So you can feel there's a little bit of roasty toasty brown sugar in there, but there is a good presence of like a straight up sweet caramel. I don't get so much in the way of like a treacle molasses kind of note out of this beer, which is quite interesting because as I say, I do know that Naird Brewing like a very long boil. So yeah, this one, the mix of things going on in this beer is very, very interesting. But like I say, you can pick out the coffee beans in this beer too. Coffee beans are one of my favourite adjuncts, of course. You know, they're almost as variable as hops when it comes to the diversity that you can get from them. It's all about the place that they're grown. You know, you've got different water profiles, different soil profiles, different varieties of bean. You know, it's all about the altitude that they're grown at as well. The higher, the maso, the meters above sea level, you know, the higher altitude at which you grow the coffee, the more likely you are to get fruity and aromatic flavours and aromas and things. So for me, the coffee notes that I get out of this beer, they are actually quite, you know, red fruity. There's a bit of that pruny, plummy, raisiny kind of thing, but there is a bit of a smooth, earthy roast underneath that, and it is quite aromatic in a way too. Yeah, so that coffee note sits at the back of the nose for sure, and it just lingers there, and I'm curious to see how that's going to come out in the actual in the flavour of the beer. So yeah, this is one of these beers. I think this, for me, the aroma of this one compared to some of the other Naird ones, a lot of the other ones can be quite kind of assertive in a way. I just remember that this that's the word that comes to mind. Of course, we're using the name of the beer in a strange way. But yeah, this one actually, for me, there's a lot more subtlety to the aroma of this beer than some of the other ones we've had from Naird. Some of them can be straightforward in their aromas, but this one it feels like it has a lot of depth to it actually. I think we've said everything we really need to about the malty side of the aroma. On the hoppy side of the beer, it is kind of as you'd expect. There's a little bit of earthiness in there, the little touch of herbal character. You can catch little you know, tiny little bits of grassiness and floral note as well. But yeah, of course, the longer you leave this beer, the more the hoppy character will drop out of it. But the fruity side of it's quite interesting too. I absolutely get some nice big raisiny characters, big juicy plummy character too. Nice oily fig, and then some brighter black berries too. Aroma wise, this is this is very, very nice. So it gets a big thumbs up from me. Potentially one of my favourite aromas that I've come across from their brewing so far. So yeah, this is pretty awesome. So as I always say, take a bit of time to enjoy the aroma of the beers before you get stuck into them. But I do think it is about time we have a taste of this one from Nerd. I've just seen, oh no, I thought it was a crack in the bottle. One of my hairs got stuck to it, but there we go. But yeah, this one is the Assert, an Imperial Affogato Stout with coffee and vanilla added into the brew. 11.5% ABV from Nerd Brewing in Arlöv here in Skåne in the south of Sweden. Slange, skål, cheers. Ooh. That is very nice actually. It's interesting because it gives you the tip of, you know, as I say, the thing that I like about Nerd is these beers always have that sort of RIS backbone to them, the Russian Imperial Stout, roasty toasty backbone. But this one's just very, very smooth and very kind of cakey, like kladkaka, in the way the flavour develops. It is a solid beer. This one, I wouldn't expect anything less from Nerd, of course. But yeah, this one strikes me as being a bit more kind of oily and thick than some of the other ones we've had from them recently. But maybe it is just that whole Affogato side of it. But regardless, it's a very, very nice beer, this one. Nerd Brewing, one of the things I would always say about Nerd Brewing as well is it's quite difficult for me to pick out a favourite beer I've had from them because, you know, they always stick to the Imperial Stout category. And they're always very, very solid. Like if you want a solid Imperial Stout in Sweden, you go to Nerd Brewing or Dugas, of course. So they always give you a good beer. They always give you a good beer. But when you have so many from the one brewery and that are similar in style, it's quite difficult to pick out a favourite. But this one, I think, is pushing toward my favourite ones that I've had from their brewing so far, and that's a statement not to be taken lightly because I think, as I say, 25 beers we've had from this brewery now. But yeah, this just has a really nice balance to it. You've got the fruitiness, you've got the sort of smoothness and silkiness in the mouthfeel. You get the aftertaste where all the more, you know, it gives you that Nerd Brewing RIS trademark, and you've just got that little bit of hoppy character to it. Yeah, this one is very, very nice and definitely pushing toward my favourite stouts that I've had from their brewing. So let's try and break this down and describe it for you a bit more properly, if we can say that. So, let's focus on that middle third of the palate then. Backbone of the beer. This is kind of interesting. I actually find this one a little bit smoother than some of the other ones we've had. The roasty toasty character in this one isn't quite as punchy as we've had, but it is there. But yeah, the backbone of this beer, absolutely, you get a little bit of that slightly dry, roasty toasty special B black malty character. That's the backbone of the beer. But as the flavour progresses in this one, I think it kind of develops a bit of a woodiness. Like toward the front of that middle third of your palate, there is a wee bit of a woodiness comes out of it. And I would say it's more woody than nutty, but there are kind of nutty elements developed within the slightly woody flavour that the beer has. Above the kind of roasty toasty blackbone, you get that really thick, you know, kladkaka, Swedish chocolate cake, you know, chocolate brownie type thing. That feels like it's the next layer up in this one. Further back on the palate, of course, you start to get more of the kind of roasty toasty dry things out of the beer. But yeah, that middle third of the palate is really kind of interesting in this one. So yeah, we've said the roasty toasty layer, the woody kind of nutty elements that come out further forward, and that really thick layer of that really kind of thick layer of almost like kladkaka brownie type thing. On top of that, you get a little bit more of that kind of sort of rye bready, and it is quite a boozy, like brandy soaked rye bread. We had a reviewed a quadruple earlier today where it was kind of similar. We had that. You get this kind of brown bready layer on top of that, which is like kind of booze soaked, if you like. So big brown kind of bready character in there, and then on top of that, you can feel a kind of chocolatey, like a sort of chocolatey layer to this. So further forward on that bready layer, you get the vanilla coming out of it, and that gives you the impression of a more kind of, as I say, 30-40% cocoa chocolate. So that's coming out on the front of the palate. As you go further back, you get this slightly more cocoa nibby, dry chocolatey character, the 70-80% cocoa type thing, and all of that is sitting on top of that kind of booze soaked brown bready layer. So yeah, this is really quite interesting in that regard. Like the fact that you've got this big layer of almost like really thick brownie. The fact that you have this kind of really thick kind of brownie kladkaka type layer, that's the thing that really gives you this Affogato note to it. But the coffee, I will point out in this beer as well, is actually quite subtle. So we'll talk about that a little bit later on. So on top of the chocolatey layer, you start to get the brown sugary notes. So we'll focus on that for the moment. So on top of that chocolatey layer, yeah, you can feel in the dead center of your palate, you have that big, treacly molasses sort of thing. And that, of course, is, the 11.5% alcohol putting its head above the parapet. So big, oily, treacly molasses brown sugars. As you move out from that a little bit, you start to get the sweeter caramel. And as you move toward the extremities of the palate, you've got a bit more of the kind of toasty. You do have a little bit of the more kind of toasty, brown, sugary characters coming out of the beer, for sure. But yeah, as I say, toward the front of the palate, you get more of the kind of chocolatey notes. You get a little bit of this kind of nutty kind of vibe to it as well, and the vanilla, of course, is sitting there. But if we go toward the back of that middle third of the palate, that's when you start to get the coffee coming out of this one. And the coffee, for me, very much sits in that border region between middle third and back third of the palate. So the coffee, you just feel that nice kind of coffee bitterness to this one. So for the coffee beans on their own, there's definitely a little bit of red fruity character to them. There's a raisiny, plummy type note to the coffee that we picked out in the aroma. Underneath that, there is a degree of floral aromaticity, not quite as strong as I thought it was going to be from the aroma. And then you've got a smooth kind of earthy note to this one. So a bit of earthiness and a kind of smooth roast as well. So yeah, the way that goes together is for me very, very nice. I like the fact that you start to get more of the aromaticity out of the coffee a bit later on. Yeah, a little bit of aromaticity out of it, good bit of red fruity note. Then you also have that kind of, as I say, just that nice kind of roasty, earthy character that lingers there. So that builds a good bridge with the roasty backbone of the beer. And this beer definitely, as most Nerd Brewing beers do, they do kind of give you a more roasty character into the aftertaste. Let's focus on that back third of the palate then. So again, the sort of roasty special B base that you have, that comes out and gets more bitter the further back that you go. You can feel that sort of kladkaka brownie type layer is taller there, and you get a bit of that density on the back third of the palate. Above that though, you get more of the kind of airy bready note that we're kind of more used to in the Nerd Brewing stouts. But as I say, this one has that, it's just the density of this beer feels a lot more, and I think that's where the kind of liqueur-y type flavours are coming. So yeah, above the kind of dense, cakey layer on the back third of the palate. You get that more almost rye bready type note. And then above all of that, you get the kind of more airy yeasty esters, and it's like a kind of very light brown bread, like brandy soaked or something like that. So yeah, the back third of the palate is definitely, the flavour is definitely taller. Then as you come further forward, it condenses down and squashes together, and that's where you're getting everything else that we've just described previously. So let's focus on the hoppy side of the beer and the fruity side of things to round off the tasting part. So yeah, back corners of the palate, nice little bit of earthiness there for sure. It's quite smooth though, but as you move further forward, maybe a tiny little bit of herbal character, but that earthy herbalness spreads as you move further forward toward the kind of front corners of the palate. There's a little bit of floral aromaticity there. Then round the front curve of the palate, there's a wee touch of a kind of lighter grassy sort of thing with this one. And it's actually, the whole green component of this beer, if we can call it that, is quite oily. But let's look at the front third of the palate then. So the border region between front and middle third of the palate, you get a little bit of that kind of, it's like a sort of brown bready build up. Base of it is a little touch of the kind of brownie clad caca type thing, and then yeah, you get that nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. So yeah, again, yeah, I do like how that, I really do like how that goes together. Yeah, fruity side of the beer then, at the back of that front third of your palate, there's a little bit of the raisiny sharpness. Underneath that, of course, you get the big oily kind of plummy characters. There's a wee bit of the kind of dry pruny notes underneath, and a bit of that datey type thing. Like the border region between front third and middle third of the palate, the more that you drink of the beer, it is more that kind of boozy, Christmas puddingy, cakey type thing that you get out of this, which is quite nice. But as you move further forward towards the middle of the front third of the palate, oily figs, and then in the front half, it's like a base of black currant and an oily blackberry on top of it. So yeah, I think the way that this beer goes about its business is really quite interesting. It's a lovely one, this, and it's actually just a lot more smooth and cakey and liqueur-y than some of the ones we've had from their brewing in the past, but it certainly strikes a chord with me. This, as I say, could potentially be one of my favourite Nair brewing ones that I've had. The roasty, I don't find this one quite as bitter as some of the other ones that we've had either, actually. It does say on the bottle though that it's 50 IBUs, so we know that. But let's round off this review then with a wee look at the mouthfeel. So for me, absolutely, it's full-bodied, kind of in the mid-range of the full-bodied. I don't think this is the thickest one we've had from Nair Brewing before, but it's not far away. The carbonation is very smooth. It does have a silky mouthfeel to a degree. We know that it's 50 IBUs. That's coming from a combination of the malty side of things and also from the hops. The malty side of this beer, as we said, bit of roasty toastiness in there. You've got that lovely big kind of smooth malt base to it. The malt base itself has a good bit of sweetness, a bit of smoothness, and just that kind of big boozy character which you want. The hoppy side of the beer, yeah, you have got a little bit of grassiness and floral character in there, but it's fairly smooth. And then the fruity side of it is really nicely done as well. So yeah, lovely big kind of fruity character. And it's that kind of oily fruit. This one's got a wee bit more dry fruity character to it than I think some of the other Nair Brewing ones that we've had in the past though. But regardless, a very nice beer, and it's certainly pushing up there with my, it's pushing up toward my favourite Nair Brewing ones that we've had in the past. So yeah, I think we can leave it at that for this review. This was very nice. So this was the Assert, an Imperial Affogato Stout with coffee and vanilla, 11.5% ABV from Nair Brewing in Arlöv, just outside of Malmö, here in Skåne in the south of Sweden. Really enjoyed this one, potentially one of my favourite Nair Brewing beers that I've had. So yeah, once again, thank you for watching my reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Nair Brewing as well. We will no doubt return to these guys fairly soon. I do have a monster of a beer from them sitting in the cupboard that I need to take a look at some point. We'll need to see. But yeah, let's leave it at that for just now. Thank you again for watching. Check out my social media, check out theirs, and give me all your beer and brewery recommendations in the comment section below. Slange it, Scott, cheers, and see you guys very, very soon.